It's January 27, 2008. Winter covers Bridgewater in Nova Scotia, Canada. That day, everything was blanketed in snow, and a storm was coming. That night, Karissa Boudreau, a girl just 12 years old, was sitting in the passenger seat next to her mother, Penny Boudreau. The two had a complicated relationship. Since moving into their new apartment with Penny's boyfriend, tensions had risen between them. Karissa had begun to feel like her mother loved her boyfriend more than she loved her. That night, Penny and Karissa had planned to go out and reconcile. They stopped at a store to buy supplies before the snowstorm arrived. Penny went in alone while Karissa waited in the car. When Penny came back, Karissa was no longer there. That's how the nightmare began. A desperate mother searching for her daughter, and an event that would shake an entire community. At first, it seemed like just another case of a troubled teenager running away because of family issues. But as time went on, the hope of finding Karissa grew smaller and smaller. What happened turned into a case that caused a great stir in Canada, a country where crimes this dark are considered rare. Everything happened in a small, peaceful town in Nova Scotia called Bridgewater. Located on the southern coast, it's a place surrounded by nature where people can enjoy all kinds of sports. Bridgewater has a small community of barely 8,500 people. It's a tight-knit town where neighbors greet each other by name, where children can ride their bikes until nightfall without fear, and where the most exciting thing that might happen in a week was someone forgetting to pay for something at the grocery store. The night of the incident, around 8:30 p.m., Penny Boudreau rushed into the police station. Her voice was trembling, her gaze was lost. She had just lost her 12-year-old daughter and had no idea where she could be. Karissa Boudreau had disappeared. According to Penny, they had argued that afternoon in the parking lot of the Sobeys supermarket. Penny claimed it wasn't anything unusual, just a common disagreement between a teenager and her mother. After the argument, Penny went into the store to buy a few things while her daughter waited in the car. When she returned, Karissa was gone. There were no screams, no commotion. She had simply vanished into thin air. In a matter of seconds, what was an ordinary Sunday turned into a nightmare. Penny told the police she had desperately driven through the streets of Bridgewater searching for her. She called her friends, her teacher, anyone who might know where Karissa was. But no one had seen her. Karissa Boudreau had disappeared without a trace. There's something important to consider. In January, Nova Scotia becomes brutally cold. Temperatures drop extremely low, and that night, a storm was hitting the area hard. Penny told officers that the last time she saw her daughter, Karissa was wearing a pair of pink Crocs, jeans, a t-shirt, a black hoodie, and a black vest. That was it. No coat, no hat. She didn't even have her phone. She had left it inside the car, which meant there was no way to contact her. For the police, that was an immediate red flag. A 12-year-old girl, not dressed for the weather, walking alone in the middle of the Canadian winter, without a phone, without any way to reach out to someone. This couldn't be just a simple runaway case. Something bad had happened. Every passing minute was critical, and fear began to take hold of Bridgewater. The next day, the desperation was already visible, and Karissa was still missing. With a missing girl out in the freezing, brutal winter, and temperatures continuing to drop dangerously, the police and the community couldn't afford to waste any time. An alert was issued and a relentless search began. The entire community came together for the same cause. Everyone was searching for Karissa. Volunteers, police officers, and search teams combed through every possible area, desperate to find any trace of the girl. 2 days after Karissa's disappearance, the atmosphere in Bridgewater was tense. Everyone felt afraid. Despite the exhaustive search, there were still no signs of the girl. On January 29th, the police held a press conference. The goal was to ask the public to share any information that might help. Sitting in front of the cameras was Penny, Karissa's mother. She looked devastated. Her eyes were red and full of tears. Penny begged for her daughter to come home safe. She pleaded with anyone who might have information to speak with the police. That day, the entire town saw a heartbroken mother who just wanted to see her beloved daughter again. At the same time, there was a breakthrough in the case. A local resident was driving along William Hebb Road in a small town near Bridgewater when he noticed something unusual in the snow. A pink flash that stood out in the white landscape. Due to the widespread coverage of the case, the driver remembered that, During the press conference, Penny had described the clothes her daughter was last seen wearing. The man approached the object and discovered the worst. It was a pink shoe. A Croc, the exact same kind Karissa had on when she disappeared. Realizing the possible connection, he took the shoe to the police. Forensic analysis confirmed the worst. The shoe belonged to Karissa. Even though police searched the area, they found nothing else. There was no trace of the girl. It was as if Karissa had simply vanished into the snowstorm. On February 1st, just a few days after the shoe was found, another press conference was held. Once again, Penny Boudreau made a very emotional appearance, begging for her daughter's return. Sitting next to her was Paul Boudreau, Karissa's biological father, and also Vernon McCumber, Penny's boyfriend and the man who lived with them. The image of the three of them together, putting their differences aside for something bigger, moved the community. As the days went by, the people of Bridgewater were growing more and more desperate for answers. Everyone agreed the search had to be intensified. It was a top priority to find her. Despite the efforts of an entire united town, there was still no trace of the 12-year-old girl. The police were under pressure. There was no evidence. No one had seen Karissa in the parking lot of the Sobeys supermarket the day she supposedly disappeared, according to her mother. There were no security cameras in the area, nothing to confirm Penny's story. Doubts about Penny's version were in the air, but that only made things more complicated, because if Penny was lying, there wasn't even a starting point to look for Karissa. On top of that, they had to face a heartbreaking truth. It was almost impossible that a girl Karissa's age would disappear for so long without contacting anyone, without leaving any trace. No one would let a missing child stay in their home without speaking up, especially with how big the case had become. As time went on, the hope of seeing her alive again began to fade. On February 6, 1 week after Karissa's disappearance, the search group reached the Le Havre River. Divers searched the waters while ground teams covered as much territory as possible. But still, there was nothing. Karissa remained missing. Then, on February 9th, almost 2 weeks after Karissa was last seen, there was, finally, a breakthrough. Around noon, 911 received a call. It came from a woman traveling down a rural road with her 9-year-old son. They had stopped for a bathroom break. The boy walked off a little, looking for privacy, when he saw something sticking out of the snow, something small and pale. The boy screamed for help. When his mother got there, she saw what had horrified her son, a few tiny toes sticking out of the snow. Horrified, she ran to call 911. Police quickly arrived at the scene. The body was immediately identified. It was Karissa Boudreau. The worst nightmare had come true. Karissa hadn't run away, she was dead. The condition in which the body was found suggested the worst. Karissa was naked from the waist down. Her small body, frozen by the winter, was lying there with her underwear pulled down to her knees. The forensic examiner, Matt Bowes, carefully studied the scene and concluded that the body had been placed there after death. It was not the location where the murder had taken place. At first glance, because of the clothing, it looked like she may have been assaulted, but DNA testing completely ruled that out. There were also marks around her neck, signs of strangulation. Karissa had been murdered. In this case, the police acted exceptionally well. First, most of the case was kept secret. Only a few details were shared with the press. This is usually done so that, during interrogations, suspects mix up what's been made public and what hasn't, revealing things that only the perpetrator would know. When the news of Karissa's death spread through the town, everyone was terrified that the person who had done this might still be out there. Someone could be walking freely around the streets, targeting children. No one knew how to react to a tragedy like this. A town that had always been safe now felt terrifying. How could anyone be capable of something like this? Was Bridgewater still a safe place, or was it time to leave? People began to question everything. In the days that followed, investigators were convinced that this had not been a random act. Someone had wanted to harm Karissa specifically. 2 local residents, both known to the girl, were interrogated and held for 24 hours before being released. Although the police did not reveal their names, they were certain Karissa knew her killer. Bridgewater's police chief, Brent Crowhurst, assured residents that they shouldn't be worried. This was an isolated incident. He said it was not the work of a predator or a serial killer. He also shared that more than 20 investigators were working day and night to find the person responsible. He asked for patience and trust. But what the public didn't know was that the two people interrogated were Penny Boudreau, Karissa's mother, and her boyfriend, Vernon McCumber. Even though they were released, they were far from being off the hook. Investigators were more and more convinced that they were involved in the case. Then, a new piece of information surfaced, one that directly pointed at Penny. It came from her neighbors, the ones who lived right below them. They reported witnessing a heated argument between Penny and her boyfriend. Vernon seemed especially angry. Things got so tense that they began throwing objects at each other. The shouting was so loud that every word stuck in the neighbors' memories. "Penny, how could you do that? I'm so angry at you. I'm not helping you this time. I'm going to leave you." By the time that happened, Penny was already a suspect. So this new information only pushed her deeper into the hole. All of Penny's public appearances, it seemed, had been nothing more than a poorly acted show. On February 14th, Penny and Vernon were far from celebrating Valentine's Day. Instead, they were sitting in a police station. They were informed that Karissa's body had been found. Then, in a strategic move, the police arrested the couple. Even with both of them in custody, the investigation remained highly confidential. The police knew they needed to keep everything under the radar in order to protect the integrity of the case. They couldn't tell the town anything yet. It wasn't time to sound the alarm, not when they were so close to uncovering the terrible truth. What the police did next was so clever it could have come straight out of a movie. The problem was this: even though they were certain of Penny's guilt, all the evidence they had was circumstantial. In court, that wasn't enough. Nothing guaranteed they could win the case. They needed something more, a confession, a solid, undeniable piece of proof. So they came up with a plan, a move worthy of a genius. While Penny and Vernon were in custody, police placed an undercover officer in Vernon's cell. This officer pretended to be a member of a criminal organization based in Montreal. He showed no interest in what had happened to Karissa. On the contrary, he focused on building a friendship with Vernon. Slowly, he gained his trust. Then he offered Vernon a deal, a business opportunity, a small job, something anyone could do. And in return, the organization would eliminate any evidence against him and his girlfriend. They both accepted without much hesitation. They saw this as a golden opportunity. They could make some money and get out of prison at the same time. They blindly trusted this supposed criminal they had just met. The police, seeing this reaction, had no more doubts. Penny and Vernon were responsible. After all, what kind of person, just days after losing their daughter, and while being investigated as a suspect in her murder, agrees to take on a job from a criminal, in exchange for getting rid of evidence that, if you're innocent, shouldn't even exist? In May, the police released Penny and Vernon. The plan had just begun. Believing they were in the clear, the couple met with the undercover officer to find out how they could help, what this big job was all about. Penny, to everyone's surprise, began to reveal everything that had happened to her daughter, without even needing to be pressured. According to the undercover officer's report, Penny began explaining that she and Vernon had been having relationship problems, most of them caused by Karissa. Vernon gave Penny an ultimatum. She had to choose between him and Karissa. Vernon told her he couldn't stand living with the girl any longer. For Penny, in her twisted mind, the choice was obvious. That day, January 27, 2008, she and Karissa went for a drive around 3 or 4 in the afternoon. They went to Lunenburg and came back. They talked during the trip, but at some point, the conversation turned into an argument and then into a heated fight. Both of them were extremely upset. Penny said she had already done what needed to be done. She also claimed that she had acted alone, that Vernon had nothing to do with it. She and Karissa arrived at the Sobeys parking lot around 5:30 p.m. Penny left the girl in the car and went to buy something to eat. She said Karissa was still alive in the car. She even called Vernon from inside the store. He didn't answer, so she left a voicemail saying Karissa had disappeared. Her decision was already made. The rest was just a matter of time. When she returned to the car, she placed the grocery bag in the trunk. At that moment, she took a piece of beige cord and put it in her pocket because, as she said, That cord would be necessary for what she had in mind. Karissa, still upset, wanted to get out of the car. Penny started driving along William Hebb Road, killing time, waiting for it to get dark. Once night fell, she finally stopped. She told Karissa that if she really wanted to get out of the car, she was free to do so. Penny admitted she couldn't let Karissa go back and tell everyone what a terrible mother she was. They both got out of the car, and that's when Penny attacked. It was already dark, and it was snowing. Karissa slipped and fell on her back. The only thing she managed to say was, "Mommy, don't." Penny described how she got on top of Karissa, placing her knee on the girl's chest to keep her down. Carissa's hands were pinned behind her after the fall, and Penny pressed down with her knees to hold her in place. Face to face with her terrified daughter, Penny took the cord, wrapped it around Carissa's neck, and pulled with all her strength. Karissa fought. She did everything she could, but eventually, she stopped moving. Penny said she remembered her daughter's desperate, gasping breaths very clearly. After that, she lifted Carissa's body and placed her in the passenger seat. Penny said she drove back to Bridgewater, thinking about what to do next. She put the cord inside an empty container and threw it in the trash. Then she drove to a remote area, pulled her daughter out of the car, and dragged her using her jeans as leverage. During this process, Carissa's jeans, underwear, and socks came off. Penny left her daughter's body there, trying to make it look like she had been assaulted. Then she simply drove away, counting on the snowstorm to hide the body for a while. Penny returned to her car, drove to a nearby swimming pool, and threw away the remaining clothes from the car, a hoodie, a vest, and one of Carissa's Crocs. When she got home around 7 p.m., she told Vernon that Karissa was missing. She was staging the perfect performance to fake concern. She wanted everyone to see her as a worried, loving mother. But the reality was chilling. Penny admitted she would do anything for Vernon. She said the thought of losing him was worse than losing her own daughter. After hearing her confession, the undercover officer was stunned. Not only had Penny confessed, she had shared details that had never been made public, details only the killer could possibly know. The police couldn't believe how well the plan was working. Penny and the officer had developed a strong bond. He had earned her trust. She had confessed. But the police wanted more. They wanted something concrete. Then, something unthinkable happened. Penny agreed to take the undercover officer to the exact place where she had committed the crime. She wanted to show him, step by step, how it had all happened. When they arrived at the scene, Penny began describing every horrific detail. She did it with a calmness that chilled the blood. No pauses, no hesitation. She even remembered Carissa's last words, "Mommy, don't." What Penny didn't know was that everything was being recorded. Hidden among the trees, several officers were filming her every word, every gesture, every step. No one could believe what they were witnessing. The coldness with which she spoke, the absolute lack of remorse. It didn't feel real, it didn't feel human. It was like she was telling a random story. But what she was describing was the murder of her own daughter. On the morning of June 14, 2008, Penny Boudreau was arrested for the murder of her daughter Karissa. Penny probably thought history was repeating itself, that it would just be temporary, that she would be released again soon. But this time was different. The police were completely prepared. They showed her the audio and video recordings, everything she had said to the undercover officer. The expression on her face changed. You could see the horror in her eyes. For the first time, Penny realized the situation she was truly in. At that point, there were no more denials. Penny Boudreau had confessed, and her confession had been recorded. At first, Penny was charged with first-degree murder. However, she agreed to a deal with the police. She would plead guilty to second-degree murder. That meant a life sentence, with no chance of parole for 20 years. When the sentence was handed down, hundreds of people showed up at the courthouse. Everyone was furious. They shouted insults at Penny from every angle. No one could understand how someone could do something so monstrous to their own child. One detail from her confession especially devastated everyone. The way Penny described her daughter's final moments, the desperate breathing, the cord, and above all, those final words, "Mommy, don't." During the sentencing, Judge Margaret Stewart looked Penny straight in the eyes and said, "You can never call yourself a mother again. The words, 'Mommy, don't' will haunt you for the rest of your life." And to this day, those words still echo in the memories of everyone involved in this case. One of the most disturbing and unforgivable parts of this crime was the way Penny manipulated the crime scene to make it look like Karissa had been sexually assaulted. After taking her daughter's life, Penny lifted her shirt and pulled down her underwear, leaving her small body completely exposed, even in death. All of it, just to mislead investigators, just to make it seem like someone else had done it. It wasn't a moment of panic. It wasn't an impulsive mistake. It was planned, cold, calculated, a vile attempt to save herself. It was heartless. Penny was pure evil. As for Vernon McCumber, he never faced any charges. The court determined that he never asked Penny to harm Karissa, not even once. According to his version, he just wanted Karissa to live somewhere else, maybe with her father. But Penny interpreted that desire as a sentence, and she made a decision that would change all of their lives forever. This is a tragic and terrifying story, one that leaves us asking, how could someone choose a relationship over their own child? Karissa Boudreau never had the chance to grow up, to live her teenage years, to find happiness. And the most heartbreaking part is that the person who took all of that away was the one who should have protected her the most, the one she trusted more than anyone. And although it seems unbelievable, in June of 2025, this case took one more shocking turn. Penny Boudreau, the woman who murdered her daughter and was sentenced to life in prison, was granted permission to leave prison without an escort. The Correctional Service of Canada allowed her to leave for 60 days, completely alone. She had been given escorted leaves before, but this time, no guards, no supervision. As expected, the decision sparked outrage, not only from Karissa's family, but from the entire community, and thousands of people across the country who still remember this case as one of the cruelest and most unjustifiable in Canadian history. Even one of Penny's parents cut off all contact with her, unable to forgive the crime she committed. And to make things worse, a psychological risk assessment conducted in 2024 declared that Penny Boudreau posed a low risk to society and had a low chance of reoffending. How can someone who committed such a brutal crime against a child, against her own daughter, be considered low risk? People from the area believe that no amount of rehabilitation will ever be enough to fix the horror of what she did to her own daughter. The story of Karissa Boudreau is heartbreaking. A girl ripped from the world in the most atrocious way possible by the person who was supposed to love her the most. And those last words, "Mommy, don't," still echo like a scream frozen in time. This case isn't just about what happened. It forces us to reflect on justice, on forgiveness, and on the question that still divides many: can someone who does something so monstrous ever be redeemed? What is justice when the damage is already done? And how does a community move on when something so horrifying happens right before their eyes? This was 44 Days. Good night.